Hare Krishna, and good morning from ISKCON Hong Kong. I'm Sravaniya Dasi, and we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, Text 30. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to ISKCON Hong Kong for the invitation to share. Okay, now we're coming to you from the Gold Coast Ashram, which is a quiet residential building, so no kirtan. But let's begin with obeisances to our Guru Maharaj. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Destarne Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanang Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanang Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Okay, so in this chapter, Sri Suta Goswami is speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, and he has given a detailed list of expansions of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so let's have a look at today's verse. Okay. Etad rupam bhagavato hyarupasya chidatmanah maya gunaya virachitam mahadadibir atmani. Word for word translation. Etat, all these. Rupam, forms. Bhagavata, of the Lord. He, certainly. Arupasya, of one who has no material form. Chit atmanaha, of the transcendence. Maya, material energy. Gunai, of the qualities. Virachitam, manufactured. Mahat adi bhi, all the ingredients of matter. Atmani, in the self. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The conception of the Virat universal form of the Lord as appearing in the material world is imaginary. Virata Rupa means a universal form. It is to enable the less intelligent and neophytes to adjust to the idea of the Lord's having form. But factually, the Lord has no material form. Purport. The conception of the Lord known as the Vishvarupa or the Virata Rupa is particularly not mentioned along with the various incarnations of the Lord, because all of the incarnations of the Lord mentioned above are transcendental, and there's not a tinge of materialism in their bodies. There's no difference between the body and self, and as there is in the conditioned soul. The Virata Rupa is conceived for those who are just neophyte worshippers. So neophyte means beginners in transcendental understanding. For them, the material Virata Rupa is presented, and it will be explained in the second canto. In the Virata Rupa, the material manifestations of different planets have been conceived as his legs, his hands, etc. Actually, all such descriptions are for the neophytes. The neophytes cannot conceive of anything beyond matter. The material conception of the Lord is not counted in the list of his factual forms. As Paramatma, or Super Soul, the Lord is within each and every material form, even within the atoms. But the outward material form is but and imagination, both for the Lord and for the living beings. The present forms of the conditioned souls are also not factual. The conclusion is that the material conception of the body of the Lord is, as Virat, is imaginary. Both the Lord and the living beings are living spirits and have original spiritual bodies. Okay, in other words, the universal form of the Supreme Lord is imaginary. It is not eternal. And this concept and this purport, like so many others concerning the Supreme Lord, seems inconceivable. That means very difficult to understand. But let's listen and let's try to understand, because Krishna will awaken intelligence from within the heart. Let us examine this further, all right? And we'll look at what Srila Prabhupada has written in other places. Now, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 4, in the purport, Prabhupada writes, the Virata Rupa, or Vishwarupa, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, which is very much appreciated by the impersonalist, is not an eternal form of the Lord. It is manifested by the supreme will of the Lord after the ingredients of material creation. Lord Krishna exhibited this Virata or Vishwarupa to Arjuna just to convince the impersonalists that he is the original personality of Godhead. Krishna exhibited the Virata Rupa. It is not that Krishna was exhibited by the Virata Rupa. Here's the main point. The Virata Rupa is not, therefore, an eternal form of the Lord exhibited in the spiritual sky. It is a material manifestation of the Lord Sri Krishna. Right? So, got that? Krishna manifested the Virata Rupa. The Virata Rupa did not manifest Krishna. That's the thing here. Okay, the Archa Vigraha, Prabhupada writes, or the worshipable deity in the temple, is a similar manifestation of the Lord for the neophytes. But in spite of their material touch, such forms of the Lord as the Virata and the Archa Vigraha are all non-different from his eternal form as Lord Krishna. What? Okay, stick with us, okay? Further details from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, text 55, purport. Now, this is the universal form chapter. Prabhupada says, in summary, the universal form of Krishna, which is a temporary manifestation. The universal form is temporary, right? And the form of time, which devours everything, and even the form of Vishnu, which is four-handed, have all been exhibited by Krishna. Thus, Krishna is the origin of all these manifestations. That's the main point of today's class, right? It is not that Krishna is a manifestation of the original Vishvarupa or Vishnu. Krishna is the origin of all forms. There are hundreds and thousands of Vishnus, but for a devotee, no form of Krishna is important but the original, two-handed Shyamasundara. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that those who are attached to the Shyamasundara form of Krishna in love and devotion can see him always within the heart and cannot see anything else. One should understand, therefore, that the purport of this 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is that the form of Krishna is essential and supreme. All right, so if this is so, then one may wonder, why did Arjuna request Krishna to show his universal form? Arjuna said, quote, though I see here before me your actual position, I yet wish to see how you have entered into this cosmic manifestation. I want to see that form of yours. If you think that I am able to behold your cosmic form, O my Lord, O Master of all mystic power, then kindly show me that universal self. So this is verses 3 and 4, chapter 11. And Srila Prabhupada explains the reason in verse number 8 purport. He says, the fact is that the devotee is not concerned with seeing the Vishvarupa, the universal form, but Arjuna wanted to see it to substantiate Krishna's statements, so that in the future people could understand that Krishna not only theoretically or philosophically presented himself as the Supreme, but actually presented himself as such to Arjuna. What you say is not as important as what you do, right? And Krishna, he showed the universal form. Okay. So my comment is that if a Mayavadi Swami claims himself to be God, be sure to ask him to show you his universal form. See what happens. Okay, some details from the second canto which were mentioned by Prabhupada in this purport. Lord Brahma, in a conversation with his son, the great sage Sri Narad Muni, gives a description of universal manifestation and Parameshvara, the supreme controller. Narada was very curious that Brahma was seeming to be deferring to someone else, as if he was not the supreme creator in the universe. And Narada was very curious about this, so Brahma told him an awful lot. Now, here in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 22, Lord Brahma said, from that personality of Godhead, all the universal globes and the universal form with all material elements, qualities, and senses are generated. And yet, he is aloof from such material manifestations, like the sun, which is separate from its rays and heat. So Srila Prabhupada gives details in the purport about the supreme truth as Purusha. Purusha means the enjoyer, right? Also known as Purushottama, the topmost supreme person. The absolute person is the Ishvara, or the supreme controller of his different energies, material and spiritual. 1/4 ekapad vibhuti of the energy is the prison house of this material world, which is full of miscreants and those inimical to the supremacy of the Lord. But the region of the tripad vibhuti, 3/4 manifestation, is a pure spiritual manifestation of the energy of the Lord. What this means is the spiritual world is 3 times bigger than the material world. The majority of living beings are in love with Krishna. They are they recognize their subordinate position, and they're happy to engage in relationship with him. And that means the pure and perfect spiritual world full of loving servants of the Lord. So, Srila Prabhupada explains, quote, the Lord therefore generates the material manifestations by impregnating the material energy. He does this by glancing. And then within the manifestation, he expands himself as the gigantic form of the Vishvarupa. The Vishvarupa, as it is shown to Arjuna, is not, I repeat, is not the original form of the Lord. Got that? The original form of the Lord is the transcendental form of Purushottam, or Krishna himself. This is Bhagavad Vedanta, not Advaita Vedanta, okay? Advaita Vedanta is the opposite. Prabhupada goes on, it is very nicely explained herein that the Lord expands himself just like the sun. The sun expands itself by its terrible heat and rays, and yet the sun is always aloof from such rays and heat. The impersonalist takes into consideration the rays of the Lord without any information of the tangible, transcendental, eternal form of the Lord, known as Krishna. Okay, so the impersonalists, they talk about the Brahmajyoti, the light, the eternal light, the energy. Yeah, but what is the energetic force? You know, what is the generating force of this energy? They don't even consider that. They totally ignore that. They act like the energy is just always there by itself. Okay, so therefore, Krishna in his supreme personal form with 2 hands and a flute is bewildering for the impersonalists, who can accommodate only the gigantic Vishvarupa of the Lord. They should know that the rays of the sun are secondary to the sun, and similarly, the impersonal gigantic form of the Lord is also secondary to the personal form as Purushottam. The Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, text 37, confirms this statement as follows. This may be familiar to some of my listeners here. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabhis Tavirya Eva Nijarupataya Kalabhi Goloka Eva Nivasati Akhilatma Bhuto Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Quote, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda, the one who enlivens the senses of everyone by his personal bodily rays, resides in his transcendental abode called Goloka. Yet, he is present in every nook and corner of his creation by expansion of happy spiritual rays, equal in power to his personal potency of bliss. End quote. Prabhupada goes on, he is therefore simultaneously personal and impersonal by his inconceivable potency, or he is the one without a second, displaying complete unity in a diversity of material and spiritual manifestations. He is separate from everything, and still nothing is different from him. So here's my observation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy is called Achintya Beda Beda, simultaneous oneness and difference. The theological view of Achintya Beda Bed Tattva asserts that God is simultaneously one with and different from his creation. God's separate existence in his own personal form is not denied, even as creation, or what is termed in Vaishnava theology as cosmic manifestation, is never separate from God. This is inconceivable from a rational point of view. And so, in the beginning of study, it requires faith. What if this is true? Let me entertain the fact, the idea. Okay, in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, text 12 through 14, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna this. All states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of this material nature. Deluded by the 3 modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the 3 modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So in other words, if one gets rid of his bad attitude of trying to lord it over everyone and everything, and agrees that the Supreme Lord is the controller, one can go back to the eternal abode, which is our home. Yes. Tripada Vibhuta, is that? Yeah, I think that's the term. No, it's forgetfulness of Lord Krishna that causes one to see material varieties as separate states of existence. From Bhagavad Gita, we learn that there is a unified field of matter wherein the modes of material nature are constantly transforming material bodies and situations. False ego means to mistakenly identify with certain aspects within the field and to oppose other aspects. The dynamic is referred to as raga dvesha. So it means attraction, repulsion, right? This description of the mentality of a conditioned soul sounds, to me, more and more like the virtual reality headsets and goggles used for video games, simulators, and trainers. The customer gets to live in his own world, so to speak, and to avoid what is going on around him. By the way, sales for these devices went up 90% during lockdown in 2021. See how that works? So the same is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 10th chapter, text 32 purport. One who does not see Lord Krishna will certainly see material variegatedness as the supreme reality. Such vision is called Maya, or gross illusion, and it is similar to the vision of an animal. So virtual reality is artificial. It doesn't exist, but the player becomes absorbed in what he imagines is good, fun, or interesting. One may remain caught in the web of fruitive activities unless one gives up this superficial separatist vision. We're allowed to forget God and our relationship with Him for as long as we desire. But the price of such forgetfulness is repeated birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, and old age is in there, okay? In this virtual reality headset, is it worth the price? No, obviously not. How to wake up from this awful dream is explained by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the 11th canto. Now, the Earth planet is so conducive to self-realization because both heaven and hell are visible here. Consequently, even a person living in a decent position is likely to begin to ask, why are people suffering? The solution is not to try to make a difference by giving a donation to a charity and supposedly helping others. You don't help someone who's drowning by saving his shirt and coat. Prabhupada gave that example. No. The person is the spirit, okay? So the answer is to see the original source of existence and to give up the superficial separatist attitude of atheistic enjoyment. This is obtained through the process of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is referred to as Ishvar Pranidhan, surrender to the Supreme, by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. Now, it's not just one of the 5 niyamas. The secret is, it's the goal of yoga. Now, among the different verses, important verses found in this chapter, I would say that number 28 is a must-read. It's a Etechang Sakala Pumsa. Okay, if you're going to teach this philosophy, be sure to memorize that verse, okay? And read the purport. Oh my goodness. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada presents some important details of the actual relationship between Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And I've quoted this very often. However, when I asked this question on a recent yoga philosophy course examination that I conducted, most of the students got the answer only half right. It seems to be a commonly misunderstood topic, which is no surprise since the vast majority of yoga philosophy circulating in the world is Advaita Vedanta, Mayavadi. impersonalist doctrine that produces atheism in the garb of religious philosophy. The Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Hindu Trinity meme is a Mayavadi equivalence theory. They also mistakenly theorize that Krishna is the 8th incarnation of Lord Vishnu, but this viewpoint minimizes Lord Sri Krishna's actual position as the supreme personality of Godhead in his original feature. Lord Vishnu is his official feature in regard to managing material affairs. In other words, Vishnu is Krishna at the office. Therefore, I highly recommend our listeners to check out Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, Text 28, for further illumination. Not to be missed. Okay? It was American writer Eric Hoffer who said, quote, "We clamor for equality chiefly in matters in which we ourselves cannot hope for excellence." End quote. But make no mistake, the artificial equivalence paradigm of spiritual oneness touted by the Mayavadi Advaita Vedanta school may sound attractive, but it promotes ignorance, which leads to social chaos. Here's a quote from Srila Prabhupada, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 25. This, you got it. This is great. All right? He nailed it. The Mayavadi philosophy has rendered the greatest disservice to humanity by promoting the impersonal view of the Supreme Lord. Thus, Mayavadi philosophers deprive human society of the real message of Vedanta Sutra. True understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, as explained in Bhagavad Vedanta, is given by the bona fide spiritual master in the authorized lineage. One needs an introduction to be accepted into the bhakti category. And those who are listening to this narration already have that stamp of approval from His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So, keep studying Prabhupada's books. And keep chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Lord reveals Himself to such a sincere devotee. So we'll end it here today. Thank you for listening. For ISKCON Hong Kong, I'm Sravaniya Dasi. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. Hari, Hari Bol.